Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply troubling story that's been absolutely dominating the headlines. It's a story that touches on massive systemic flaws, immense personal stress, and government debts that are, in some cases, literally decades old. We're going to look closely at exactly how Centrelink is actively pursuing these debts and what that actually means for everyday people. It's a really complex web of administration and legislation, so let's jump right in and unpack how we got here.
Okay, let's dive into this staggering number. $4.93 billion. That is the total amount of unpaid debts that Centrelink is currently pursuing. And we're not just talking about a handful of massive corporations or high net worth individuals making up that sum. This massive figure is being chased down from 1.34 million everyday people across the country. It's just an astronomical scale of debt recovery, and it's impacting a massive slice of the population.
Section 1. The scale of the crisis, pursuing decades-old debts. When we look at the timeline of these debts, the numbers are absolutely staggering. This brilliantly illustrates the escalating tiers of the problem, because we aren't just talking about a recent administrative glitch or a simple overpayment from last year. We've got 600 debts that are over 30 years old, carrying a median amount of $5,451. Then, there's this massive block of 76,800 debts sitting between 15 and 30 years old. But get this. The absolute oldest outstanding debt currently being pursued was raised more than 40 years ago. Think about that for a second. We are literally talking about debts from the early 1980s.
Section 2. Unlawful math and the High Court. How were these debts calculated?
So, the core of the problem really lies in a piece of administrative jargon known as income apportionment. Between 2003 and 2020, Centrelink used this specific method to average a person's income across different payment periods. So say you earned a lump sum in 1 week, well, the system might have averaged that money out over multiple weeks, basically assuming you were earning a steady stream of income across periods where you actually earned nothing at all. This practice was completely flawed, and crucially, it was ultimately found to be unlawful. This single calculation method created a staggering $4.4 billion in potentially illegal debts, affecting up to 3 million Australians.
This unlawful calculation method actually went all the way to the High Court recently, in the case of Chaplin versus Secretary Department of Social Services. Take Matthew Chaplin, for example, a plumber who had a debt raised against him in 2019 for work he completed as a student back in 2014 and 2015. Now, ultimately, the High Court dismissed his appeal, meaning his specific debt was not waived. However, this decision is incredibly important because it provided crucial legal clarity. The court confirmed that, yes, while that old averaging method was unlawful, there are other perfectly lawful ways for the government to go back and recalculate these old debts.
Now, the government did set up an income apportionment resolution scheme, which offered payments of up to $600 for those affected by these specific unlawful calculations. But the discrepancy here is just staggering. While up to 3 million Australians were potentially affected by this unlawful math, only 78,000 people have actually applied for the scheme. That's a tiny fraction of the people impacted, which really highlights a massive gap between the systemic error itself and the people who are actually getting any form of resolution.
Section 3. The heavy human toll. Let's zoom in on the human cost.
You know, it's really easy to get lost in billions of dollars and millions of people, but we need to move from the macro data down to the micro-human impact. Let's look at a specific case study. A 78-year-old retired teacher spent 6 grueling years fighting an $8,000 Centrelink debt. He had actually been doing everything right, diligently sending in letters to report his casual work, but Centrelink failed to process those letters, and a massive debt was raised against him anyway. And sadly, his experience is far from isolated. Just to give you some context on how widespread this is among older folks, over 287,000 debts were raised against age pensioners in just the last 5 years alone.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the profound emotional toll it takes, which is captured perfectly by this retired teacher. He described the whole ordeal as having damaged my mental health and made me feel like a fraud and a crook. I mean, just think about carrying that kind of weight for 6 years. Principal Solicitor Catherine Eagle notes that this kind of experience deeply erodes public confidence. It makes everyday citizens feel entirely blamed and criminalized for what are fundamentally administrative errors within a massive government bureaucracy.
Section 4. New waivers and unkept promises. Policy versus reality.
So, the crucial point is this. The highly publicized Robodebt Royal Commission specifically recommended reinstating a 6-year time limit on debt recovery, and the government actually agreed to this in principle. Yet, the reality is starkly different. The government has completely failed to implement that 6-year time limit. Instead, the department is still using computer programs to automatically review debts, and as we just saw, they are actively pursuing debts that are over 40 years old. The promise and the practice are simply not matching up at all.
However, there have been some recent policy changes that do offer a degree of relief. Let's break down these new government waiver rules. First off, there's a small debt waiver. Debts under $250 will automatically be waived, but only if they're raised after March 2026. Next is a really important update. The Special Circumstances Waiver has been expanded. It now officially includes major life pressures like family violence, homelessness, and mental health difficulties. And finally, there's a retroactive application rule. This means these waivers can actually apply to debts that you have already repaid, which could potentially result in a refund for some people.
Section 5. Navigating the system. What you can do.
Let's move on and see how this builds into concrete steps you can take right now if you're facing a debt, especially an old one. First, seek free legal advice. Seriously, do not ignore it. Reach out to community legal centers, legal aid, the Welfare Rights Center, or the Seniors' Rights Service. Second, lodge an appeal. You have a fundamental right to request an independent review of any debt decision made against you. And finally, don't navigate this alone. The system is incredibly complex and the stress can be totally overwhelming. Utilize these free resources to help you manage the burden and fight your case effectively.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this lingering thought, inspired by Kate Allingham, the CEO of Economic Justice Australia. Ask yourself, if you were asked to prove your income from 30 years ago, using paper payslips from the 1990s, could you do it? It really highlights the fundamental core unfairness of expecting everyday citizens to defend themselves against decades-old debts. As you think about that, thank you for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.